You're listening to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to. And yes, we can put sex and drugs and Jesus all in the same bed and still be all right at the end of the day. My name is Devanin, and I'll be interviewing guests from every corner of this world as we dig into topics that are too risque for the morning show, as we strive to help you understand what's really going on in your life. There is nothing off the table, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into this episode. The Ramble by the River podcast is hosted by none other than Jeff Nesbitt. Jeff has been podcasting for quite some time now, and he brings a unique passion and flavor to the table that I personally resonate well with, and I hope you all will too. In this interview, we're going to talk about how Jeff got kicked out of his church for getting a divorce, how hypnosis plays into church services, male body image issues, and Jeff's mushroom experiment in the crack shack, y'all. That right there was a hoot, and it's totally worth sticking around to listen to. Enjoy the show. Jeff, thank you so damn much for coming on to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast today. I say that with my church finger up, like the ushers would have in church on a Sunday morning. It is so glad to have you. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, of course, it's only the polite thing to do, and I am a Southern belle. You had me on your show, and then of course, I would have you up on mine. I wouldn't dream of having it any other way. And
Perfect.
now your show is called Ramble by the River. I want you to tell us where you came up with that name, the flow of your show, and why you were inspired to call it that.
All right. So, yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure already, and I think it's going to be a good episode. And I had you on my show last week, as you mentioned, and it was really fun. So my show, Ramble by the River, has been going now since January of 2021. And it started because I have a job where I spend very much of my time by myself. And I really enjoy connecting with people. It wasn't something I was getting in my day-to-day life, and I started to miss it. And I really just needed that connection. So I started trying to pursue different avenues of creativity, like just music was one of them, and just trying to find what was going to bring me some kind of satisfaction. And I've been listening to podcasts pretty often since around 2015. And by pretty often, I mean like every day for several hours, because I'm driving all the time. I'm by myself. So you can really click in and engage to some content when it's just you and nothing else. And so, yeah, I ended up getting my favorite podcasts, which I'll shout them out right now, are the King and the Sting with Brendan Schaub and Theo Vaughn. That one's great. Theo Vaughn is in general very good. He's got another one called This Past Weekend. He's a comedian from California. He's from Covington, Louisiana, so he's down there from where you're at. Let's see, who else we got? Aubrey Marcus podcast is one that I like a lot. He's pretty cool. Joe Rogan obviously is like the godfather of podcasting. Mark Maron, just, the classics. And so I would basically felt like I'd built these relationships with these content creators who I already mostly knew through traditional media forms like TV shows, movies, things like that. A lot of stand-up comedians. And I just really started to like the medium. Podcasting is different than anything else because it's long form. And I got so used to trying to communicate who I was through 140 characters or through a picture or through one Facebook post. And especially in a climate of everybody just bitching constantly about what other people post on social media. So I just felt very self-conscious because no matter what you post on those short form platforms, you're going to be misinterpreted by somebody if it's worth even reading in the first place. If it's just boring as fuck in the first place, no one even cares. You're not even going to get any traction on it. And then if you're a little provocative to try to get a little bit more attention, then you're going to hurt somebody's feelings or piss somebody off or create a disagreement with somebody. And it's just not a good way to communicate. It's not effective. It doesn't create that sense of community that we're all looking for and that we all need. it does actually quite the opposite. It creates division and polarization and increases some of the tribalism that is causing havoc in our political system today. So I didn't want any part of that. And I really have never liked social media. So I mean, I like the idea of it. I liked it back in the very beginning days, like 2007, when it was like almost anonymous and it wasn't all talking to other platforms. Before Twitter and Facebook and Instagram all connected, it seemed better to me, but I digress. I didn't like those forms as a way to express who I am. And in this digital world, you have to do that. That's where we're living now, especially during the pandemic. We are essentially living in the simulation. We're jacking into the system every day. We're going to work through our computers. We are living digital lives. And I wanted to do that in a form that could actually capture of the most accurate representation of who I really am. And I think that's podcasting because it's just it's a time capsule of your thoughts and opinions of that moment because it's not always researched fully. It's not always supported with evidence. I like them to be, ideally they will be, but a lot of the time it's just raw. It's emotional stuff just pouring out of you. And anybody can do that. Once you open the tap and just try not to feel super vulnerable, it's pretty therapeutic. So after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to start a podcast. And buddy who lived right down the road, I grew up with, also named Jeff. And I'm like, and him and me both kind of battle with depression. So it's something we've dealt with since like middle school, and we've been friends for a very, very long time. And we both deal with it. We recognize that in each other. So we've kind of talked with each other about it that entire time. And so wintertime, as most people who struggle with depression know, wintertime is the rough time. That's when stuff starts to get harder and you have to work a lot harder to just keep your head above water. It's dark, it's cold, it's wet. It's just like, it's a wet blanket on your soul, a Pacific Northwest winter. So we're like, let's start a podcast. It could be Jeff and Jeff Incorporated, and which is like our pretend fake company that we started in fourth grade. So we started getting stuff together, and he's a fisherman, a commercial fisherman. So pretty quickly he was having to go work, and so I was out here building the studio, and I the majority of it by myself. I painted this mural, I which wraps all the way around the room, and I put in quite a few hours on this studio, and it came together, and I was like, well, shit, now I have a podcast studio. I better start a podcast. So I started workshopping names, and I just keep a list in my phone. Every time I would think of one or something clever came up, I'd put it in the phone. And by the time I had around 50 names, I thought, okay, one of these has to work. And I had a hell of a time picking because I wanted something that was memorable, but also kind of fit the style. It's just like, it's tough. So you also have a really good name, by the way. I meant to compliment you on that. Yeah. So Ramble by the River came from, I wanted to use the word ramble just because I think it's a catchy word. And I was like that song Ramblin' Man. And I think it's the Allman Brothers. I don't know. We'll get a copyright infringement if we sing it. But yeah, from there, I'm by a river. I tried it out and I liked the logos and I went with it. Plus, I always kind of felt like this is my training wheels into the world of podcasting because when I started, I didn't know how to podcast. I just started. And so I set a goal of accomplishing 50 interviews in the first year, and I needed a show to do that with. So that's how Ramble by the River was born.
And so it is. I'm so glad that you gave birth to it. I bet you looked great when you were preggers. And so, and so I love everything that you said. And I feel like that even though like the guests that come on a lot of our shows may not have like like be like a doctor, have some sort of acronym behind their name to necessarily justify their experience. I feel like that the guest experience is the most justifiable of all. because a person's lived experience to me outweighs a PhD or an MD or anything like that. And so for somebody to come on my show, I don't care if they have, you know, a PhD or anything like that. They have to have had, gone through something themselves. At least, especially like from episode 9 moving forward, because that's when I took over, production and recruiting and everything myself. And so, because that's what I want to know about, that's what my audience is trying to hear, know, bitch, what did you go through? We need to hear about that because people will, when people feel like they can relate to a person, then they will listen to them. And it's easier to relate to somebody who's been divorced, who's been kicked out of church, who's been slapped across the face, or who's had to whip a bitch ass at some point, you know, and
Check all those boxes.
right. And so, as opposed to somebody with a PhD, because less people have PhDs than do, but everybody has had a bad day, or has gone through a terrible experience, or has, a little skeleton tap dancing in their closet they may not want somebody to know about, you know, or hadn't learned exactly how to kill that bitch yet, or just let him out so he can just twirl for fuck's sake. And so, and that, and then I'll also like you referred to podcasts as a time capsule. I agree. I feel like every episode we record, where we write blogs, books, we keep a website, those things, write music and things like that, those intangible electronic things will outlive us, and so once we, as long as the earth remains, these platforms are going to be here because there's so much money in it and so much people doing it, you know, so once we're all like dead in spirits floating around doing whatever the fuck spirits do, this work will still be here. So in future generations, when people come along who have going through the same shit, because everything kind of seems to happen each generation over again, then they'll still be able to hear what we had to say, and our voices will be heard. And we are eternal until there is no more earth. And so I agree. That's a great reason to have started your podcast, and I'm glad that you have it.
Yeah, I mean, you could go to a Tupac concert in 2018 because they recorded his voice, they recorded his physical form, and they're reproducing it digitally. That's exactly the same thing. It's just we're trying to become immortal, essentially.
And I appreciate the transparency because you didn't go have your personal experiences, which we're about to get into some of those, and go, achieve your successes with it, and then go run off and have your happy, successful life. Taking time to talk about that to help somebody else is a huge thing. Because, like in the Bible, Jesus heals those 7 lepers, I think it was, and then most of them skipped off, you know, rejoicing and seeing what they had received, and only one came back to give thanks. And so to me, every episode, you record is a way of giving thanks, for the blessings that you have and everything like that. So I look at it as a project of gratitude.
That's so exactly what it is. I pray every time I do one of these things before I do it that I will know what to say, and if I don't know what to say, that it comes off at least as funny, so that people can get some benefit out of it. But yeah, I think that a lot of what I do every day is practicing gratitude. I love my life, and I didn't always love it, and so I appreciate the contrast.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about your family gratitude list and stuff like that later on. So for now, I want to get more into your history, like with the church, because you and I both have an interesting relationship with the church and this concept of Christianity here in America. Now, I know that you were kicked out for some things that happened. I want you to tell us your story.
Yeah, happy to. So kicked out is probably a little bit strong of a term. I don't want to talk down on the church at all or anything, but essentially I had been teaching a Sunday school class for kids for a few years, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was fucking good at it. And so, just showing up every Sunday, just kind of killing it as a Sunday school teacher. The kids loved me. I was doing the Lord's work. And my marriage was not going great, which, you know, wasn't surprising to anybody, including the pastor who married us, who subsequently asked me to please not teach Sunday school class anymore because I was getting divorced. And he thought it was going to set a bad example for the kids. And I disagreed. I still disagree because that was like my church family. And it as even I tried so hard. I was understanding, and it hurt my feelings. It really kind of was just like, dang, I guess because I had thought that I was providing more value to the church family than just like setting an example of what a good marriage looks like. There are other facets of the human experience that I felt like I was still doing okay. That one part of my life was falling apart, and I guess that was enough to make me not the best role model. I don't know. It wasn't the justification for it was not really my concern. After that point, a lot of people were like, "Oh, you should have fought that or gone back." But it wasn't. I don't want to do that. I don't want to force myself into any place. It's like this podcast. If you don't like it, turn it off. I don't care. I'm just trying to be me. And I have stuff to share. So I was trying to do that, and it didn't work out. So I haven't been back to that church since, but I hear good things about it. I know it's grown, and I wish them the best. But yeah, it was a sad moment. I haven't really found a good church home since then. And that sucks. I think that community is crucial, and church, whether you're fully on board with the faith aspects of it or not, it's a really good exercise in human connection. Like even going to church that you don't traditionally follow the religion, it's a interesting experience to put yourself through that because they're weird.
You said because they're weird.
Yeah, they're weird. If you go into a church and you've never been to church before, and they're speaking in tongues or they're wearing dresses and giving peace of Christ, I mean, there's some baffling shit going on at church. And I grew up with it, so I didn't realize how silly it seems to those who haven't been indoctrinated. But you look at it through fresh eyes and you're like, okay, this is all equally baffling, every religion. So it's like, I don't know. I'm really not critical of people's faith because everybody's just searching for meaning and people find it in different places.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, Jeff. And although you don't want to talk bad about your church, I will. They can eat a dick, and and I would extend the middle finger to them. That's
Oh, that's not Christ like.
no, it isn't. But I'm not a spirit, and I'm not Jesus Christ, so I'm not gonna be Christ like all the time. So I just stepped in the flesh for just a moment. Now I'm back out of the flesh, and
Well,
so
I appreciate you sticking up for me.
oh, I'll do it. I know, like so there are people out there who maybe they don't cuss as much as I do, or they won't do, things like what I just did with flipping off churches and whatnot. And I'm happy to do it for them, because it just needs to be done sometimes. And, I'm aware of my spirituality and my power in Christ and the Holy Ghost and all that. And I'm also very grounded in the fact that I'm still a human, and I just, every now and then, a bitch's ass might need to get whooped, and I may need to get flipped out or something like that. And I'll pray about it later, and then it'll be all right. And I feel great. And so this is a huge thing, and I want to take some time to marinate here because there's many people who've been kicked out of churches. We've only seen a few of the accounts on the news for various reasons. You say kicked out is a strong term, but like when I was technically removed from ministry at Lakewood because they found out that I was LGBTQ and therefore unfit to serve in the adult choir or around children anymore. You know, then nobody specifically said don't come back to the church. But Jeff, the feeling once you throw somebody out of something that meant so much to them, like you said, I just wanted to come and share my gifts. There was, and now I can't do that here. It's like getting a divorce. It's like being married and getting a divorce, but then trying to stay in the same house.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
It's a rejection.
you're not going to do that. Now, now the church in their arrogance thinks that you probably can, if not should, just come on back and sit through a service, like nothing's changed, but everything's changed because they made you look like a heretic, and bad and terrible. And they took one thing that they didn't like and they let that overshadow all of the great and fabulous things that you had been doing, you know, never mind your work ethic, consistency, qualifications. And actually, it seems like you were, called by God to be doing this. As you said, you were damn good at it. Well, the only way that happens is if the Lord is with you. And so, in terms of like your effectiveness and actually reaching people and connecting, like it sounds like you were. And so humans decided that you have reached a stumbling block in your life or an impasse or a rough spot. This is the priority and this now defines you. What fuck them because they don't get to pick that. But see, this happens to a lot of people. And like you said, you never really found the church again. You know, it was a long, long road, like, I don't know, 10, 15 fucking years before I found one I was comfortable, and again, that sort of breakup is catastrophic to somebody, you know, in not only us, but also people, our friends who have watched us get kicked out, of allies, both LGBTQ allies, but even friends of straight people like yourself who've been kicked out. They go, it didn't happen to them, but they're like, look at what you did to my friend. I'm not fucking with churches either, And so, what would you say to people who have been kicked out of churches before, removed from ministries, and the friends and allies of those who have watched this happen to people who they know are good people and could not understand why the church was being so antagonistic?
I would say to try to find God where you can. And like I said before, that does not look the same to everybody. And God doesn't even mean the same thing to everybody. To me, God means one thing, but to my mom, it means a completely different thing. And I was raised very, I always hesitate when I say I was raised very religiously, but my mom is a very religious woman and she believes completely in the doctrine of the Christian church and not the Catholic Church, which is like the old Christian church, but like contemporary American Christian church. And it's where I grew up it was called, oh, let's see, it was a community church, but denominationally, it was kind of like an evangelical. So it was big and showy and the music was everything and lots of speaking in tongues. And it's so I go back and forth on that. So because of that early exposure to that kind of culture, I am extremely hesitant to get involved in any kind of group hypnosis bullshit. Like everybody put your hands up or everybody do that. I don't like any of it. I'll barely do the wave at a football game. Like you try to get me to do a chant with hand motions, fuck off. I'm not doing it. You're not hypnotizing me. Because I understand psychology. That's what's really going on is engaging in a mass hypnosis. And so when you do that and you're bonding your consciousness with all these other people in a collective consciousness under a banner of some kind of greater purpose, it's extremely powerful and you open yourself up to all kinds of manipulation. And so it's just, that's not to say that every time those tools are used to open your operating system, that doesn't mean that every time that happens, it's for malicious means, but it does mean that that's always a possibility. So I'm skeptical. And when people are, I love to see people praising God and worshiping and stuff, but when they bring out the basket of ribbons and the ladies are twirling them and people are speaking in tongues and falling over and stuff, I start to really feel uncomfortable. So yeah, I don't know. I can appreciate spirituality. And at the same time, I understand that it has a lot of power to control and corrupt people. So I'm really skeptical of really, really highly emotional groups of people, I guess is probably the best way to say it. On the other side of that, my father was not a highly religious man. He tried really hard, but deep down, he's kind of a thug and kind of at times criminal. And just he was kind of an abused child and he led a very difficult life. And he taught me the way of the world was to protect yourself, and everybody's out to get you. You've got to learn how to fuck them before they fuck you. And so I had this strange just the juxtaposition of the turn the other cheek mentality coming from my mom, where, put yourself last, be humble, be like, be humble, be the servant to the world. And then on my dad's side, it was like, take care of yourself, protect your family, get yours. Don't let somebody make you their bitch. Just, get out there and set yourself up for success as a human being. And so those are two very far points from each other on the whole spectrum of existence. And so I landed smack dab right in the middle. So I feel like I'm kind of a unique perspective, and it definitely shaped the way I see the church. And to get back to your question, the way I would tell a person to handle that situation where they've seen people in the church doing things that they shouldn't have done, or somebody they trusted let them down, or there is always going to be those times, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. And as much as we want to think of religious figures as above suspicion, they're fucking not. They're just humans too. And they get in the flesh, and they like titties, and they like sex, and they like drugs, and they like all the same stuff we like. And they like stuff that's a little bit naughty, just like humans. Everybody's a human. So I really try to separate God from the church, from the people in the church, because I think all three of those are very separate and distinct things. So I would just suggest that people look for God somewhere where he is, because he's not in every church. And he is in he's in everything. He is a bad term, but God is everywhere. God is what holds the universe together. And that's what I believe. And I think that if you open your heart and look for God, you can find him in very unexpected places.
I concur. You don't necessarily need a physical building in order to communicate with the Lord, as the Bible says, in my understanding, that he's as near as the very air that we breathe. And so there's no need to go searching about, he's already there. It's a matter of your awareness and tapping into its presence. And then I agree, God is not in every church, in the sense that his love is not necessarily being expressed there through the people in charge and running things like that. So some
You could feel it in the building. You could feel it when you're there. Like, you could tell when this group of people is united to help the world. And sometimes this group of people doesn't give a fuck about what's going on outside these walls.
right. And so, and like, so y'all, what Jeff was saying about like hypnosis and stuff like that has to do with how overwhelming all the different practices and things like that can be. From my study of hypnosis and stuff like that, basically, when you have a whole lot of summing up, when you have a whole lot of different shit going on, your critical mind, which is only like 12% of the brain, like your subconscious mind is like 80% of it. It's like way more than what you might think. But when you overwhelm the critical mind, you stop being so critical, and then you just kind of start accepting a bunch of shit. So when you have the people speaking in tongues and twirling about, and the music is playing, and you've already got a whole platform set up, and the people are up there on stage, and so they're already looking down at you, and you're already looking up at them. You don't really have much of a critical mind left by the time all that is done. And like he's saying, you're in a state of what is known as hypnosis at that point, when your critical mind has been broken down enough for you to be on the receiving end of stuff that you might otherwise be more critical of. Sometimes it can be used good in the places where the love of God actually is, and sometimes it's not, in places where it isn't. And perhaps they might use that to manipulate even all kinds of things, giving money, especially stuff like that. You do have to be careful for, you know, in the falling out in the quote unquote in the spirit shit. I've been in unfortunate situations before where there have people who like literally try to put their hand on people and like make them lay on the ground, stuff
I've
like that.
seen that.
Look, the Holy Ghost is real. There is a version of that that's actually authentic, but those people,
100%.
people who are gifted like that, and the Lord is using them don't even have to touch people. If they're gonna fall out like that, and the Lord is gonna slay somebody in the spirit, as it is called, it ain't gonna have to be forced. And then you're not going to have people like I've seen people making people talk in tongues and telling them to do it, you know, and then dancing in the spirit and stuff like that is real too. But then you've got Sister Sarah, who every damn Sunday at 11 o'clock, there she go up and down the aisle, you know, like clockwork. We're not talking about that bitch.
Sister Sarah's got a word again.
Of course she has the fucking word. She always has a damn word. Sister Sarah needs to go set her ass down somewhere because Sister Sarah is addicted to church and doesn't realize it. That's all we have for the free version of the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, my beautiful people. But hey, if you're vibing on what you're hearing and want to take it to that next level, then perhaps a subscription may be in order. Access to full-length episodes only costs $2.99 a month, or you can do $25 for a year. Or if you're down on your cash, you can literally donate any amount for 30 days of full access. All of this information can be found at sexdrugsandjesus.com, where you'll also find my blog and lots of resources as well. Your subscription strengthens our ability to reach the world and help hurting people, and by subscribing, you would become a part of that effort. Thank you so much for listening, and just remember that everything is gonna be all right.